Open this gate right now, or I swear to God, I am calling the police on your wife for kidnapping." That was how my Tuesday started, with Pamela Driscoll, the president of the Blackwood Creek Homeowners Association, screaming at the top of her lungs while clutching the iron bars of my ranch entrance like she was a prisoner in a B-movie, shaking with a fury that threatened to crack her immaculate foundation makeup. She had been demanding access to my property for months, claiming she needed to inspect my 20 acres for safety violations that existed only in her imagination. And when my wife, Sarah, calmly refused to unlock the gate without a warrant, Pamela played her trump card. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen with a manicured nail, and dialed 911, screaming into the receiver that a dangerous woman was holding her against her will and threatening her life at Blackwood Farm. It was a lie, a pure, unadulterated fabrication. But as I watched her perform this little piece of theater, I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange sense of pity, because Pamela Driscoll didn't know who my wife really was. She didn't know that the dangerous woman she was trying to frame had a badge in her back pocket that carried more weight than Pamela's entire existence. And she certainly didn't know what was going to happen when those patrol cars actually showed up. You ever watch a predator realize they just walked into the lion's den? Stick around, because you're about to see exactly what that looks like. To understand why a woman like Pamela was obsessed with a dusty piece of farmland like mine, you have to go back to the beginning, back to 1948 when my grandfather, a man who didn't say much but worked harder than a mule, bought these 20 acres with the money he saved from the war. He built the barn with his own hands, planted the first orchard, and laid the foundation for what would become my sanctuary. I spent 10 years in the tech industry, sitting in a cubicle under fluorescent lights that hummed like a dying insect, writing code that didn't matter for people I didn't like, and every day I felt a little piece of my soul dry up and blow away. So when my dad passed and left me the farm, I didn't hesitate. I traded my keyboard for a tractor, my ergonomic chair for a pair of muddy boots, and I never looked back. Life on Blackwood Creek was simple, hard, and honest, or at least it was until the development started. About 5 years ago, the rolling hills around us were carved up and paved over to make way for the estates at Blackwood, a sprawling subdivision of McMansions where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the residents seemed to think that nature was something you watched on TV, not something you lived in. And ruling over this kingdom of beige stucco was Pamela Driscoll. 2 months ago, she showed up at my gate with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile a shark gives you right before it takes a bite. And she made me an offer. "Caleb," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "have you ever considered what this land could be worth to the right people? I have connections. We could turn this smell into a very comfortable retirement for you." I politely declined, telling her that my grandfather's legacy wasn't for sale at any price. And that's when the mask slipped, just for a second. "Everything has a price, Caleb," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "You'll learn that the hard way." I should have listened. I should have realized that a woman wearing a blazer that cost more than my truck wasn't used to hearing the word no. But I was naive, thinking that property rights still meant something in this country. That naivety died the morning of the inspection. Sarah, my wife, had been acting strange for weeks. She's always been private about her work in law enforcement, usually just saying she handles logistics. But lately she was checking her phone every 30 seconds, taking calls in the garage, and carrying a tension in her shoulders that even my best massages couldn't work out. "Big things coming, Cal," she'd say, kissing me goodbye in the morning, rushing out in her crisp business suit. "Just trust me, okay? We're almost there." I trusted her with my life, obviously, but I had no idea that there was a collision course with Pamela Driscoll. It started with a HOA meeting I was forced to attend. Pamela had been fining me for everything under the sun: unauthorized livestock noise, my rooster; unsightly agricultural equipment, my tractor; and offensive odors, manure, which is literally what makes a farm work. At the meeting, she ambushed me with a new amendment they had quietly passed, Amendment 47B, which stated that any property engaging in commercial activity, and since I sold eggs at the farmer's market, that was me, was subject to monthly health and safety inspections by an HOA-appointed official. It was a trap, plain and simple. So there I was at 7 a.m. on a Monday, watching Pamela's white Mercedes pull up to my gate, followed by her shadow, a spineless man named Arthur Pembroke who acted as her legal counsel, and a guy who looked like he bought a health inspector costume from a Halloween store. "Good morning, Caleb," Pamela chirped, stepping out of her car in heels that sank immediately into the gravel. "We're here for the inspection. Open the gate." "I don't think so, Pamela," I said, standing on the other side of the fence, my arms crossed. "This is private property, and unless you have a warrant signed by a judge, you aren't setting foot on my land. I don't care what your little HOA bylaws say. State law trumps your club rules." She didn't like that. She signaled to Arthur, who started filming with his phone, his hands shaking slightly. Arthur always looked like he was one loud noise away from a heart attack. And then she signaled to Inspector, who tried to step around the gate. I stepped in his path. I didn't touch him. I didn't raise my voice. I just occupied the space where he wanted to be. And that's when Pamela decided to win an Oscar. She let out a gasp, stumbled backward as if I had shoved her, and fell onto the hood of her car, clutching her pearls. Literally, she was wearing pearls at 7 a.m. on a farm. "He attacked me," she shrieked, looking directly at Arthur's camera. "He's violent. Arthur, are you getting this? He just assaulted me." I stood there, frozen, hands clearly visible at my sides, watching this woman fabricate a crime in real time. "Pamela, stop it," I said. "There are cameras on the gate. You're making a fool of yourself." "I'm calling the police," she yelled, already dialing. 911. "Yes, I'm at Blackwood Farm. The owner is attacking us. He's unhinged. I fear for my life." It was terrifying how easily the lies rolled off her tongue, how she could summon tears on command, turning a property dispute into a hostage situation in under 30 seconds. 15 minutes later, 2 cruisers rolled up, lights flashing but no sirens, a sign they weren't buying the active shooter vibe Pamela was selling. The officers, Martinez and Kowalski, looked tired, the kind of tired you get when you realize half your job is babysitting adults who never learned how to share. "Sir," Martinez said, approaching me while Kowalski went to deal with the weeping Pamela, "we got a call about an assault." "Officer," I said, pointing to the CCTV camera mounted on the post. "I haven't moved from this spot." She tripped over her own ego. While they took statements, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "I'm watching the feed," she said, her voice icy calm. "Don't say anything other than the facts. Don't get angry. Don't sign anything. I'm handling it." "Handling it how?" I whispered, watching Pamela sob into a tissue while checking her makeup in the side mirror. "Just trust me," she said, and hung up. The police left with a warning to keep our distance, clearly seeing this for the civil dispute it was. But Pamela wasn't done, not by a long shot. By noon, the video Arthur filmed, edited to cut out the part where I didn't touch her, was all over the neighborhood Facebook group, captioned, "Violent Farmer Attacks HOA President. Is our community safe?" By dinner time, the reviews started tanking. My farm page was flooded with 1-star reviews from people who had never bought an egg from me in their lives, calling me a psycho, a danger to children, and demanding the farm be shut down. I watched 10 years of reputation evaporate in 6 hours. My wholesale buyers started calling to cancel orders. The local organic grocer said they were pausing our partnership. And even the coffee shop where I sold honey said they couldn't risk the bad PR. I felt like I was drowning, standing in the middle of my kitchen while the world I built crumbled because one woman wanted a payday. And then came the letter, delivered by a courier, printed on paper so thick you could shingle a roof with it, from the law firm of Sterling, Pembroke and Associates. They were suing me for $500,000 for emotional distress, assault, and creating a public nuisance, and they were threatening to file a lien against the farm if I didn't settle within 10 days. I started digging then. I'm not a cop, but you don't spend a decade in tech without learning how to follow a digital trail. I looked up the law firm. Jonathan Sterling, senior partner, was Pamela's brother-in-law. I looked up the development company that built the subdivision, Apex Horizon Group, and found that Pamela was a silent shareholder. And then I started looking at the other farms in the county. The Miller Place, the old Henderson Orchard, the Green Valley Dairy. All of them had been hit with similar lawsuits. All of them had faced HOA harassment, and all of them had sold to Apex Horizon for pennies on the dollar just to make the pain stop. It was a racket, a systematic, predatory machine designed to grind families into dust, and pave over their heritage. I was sitting in my truck on Wednesday, staring at a foreclosure notice for the Henderson place, when my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the diner on 4th. Back booth. Alone. Arthur. Arthur Pembroke. I almost didn't go. It smelled like a trap, but desperation makes you do crazy things. I found him huddled in the booth, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week, nursing a black coffee with shaking hands. My daughter, he said, not even looking up when I sat down. She's studying pre-law. She found my files. She looked at me like I was a monster, Caleb. He slid a flash drive across the table, his eyes darting to the door. It's all there, he whispered. The emails, the falsified safety reports, the kickbacks from Apex Horizon, the script she wrote for the 911 call, everything. Why? I asked, pocketing the drive. Because I can't be the man my daughter thinks I am, he said, tears welling up in his eyes. Pamela is going to destroy you on Friday, Caleb, at the settlement meeting. She's going to offer you a lowball buyout or threaten to bury you in litigation until your grandkids are paying off the debt. So what do? You wait, Arthur said, standing up to leave. Friday at 3 p.m. Don't sign a damn thing until 3 p.m. I went home and told Sarah everything. The lawsuit, the conspiracy, Arthur's flash drive. She listened, sitting at the kitchen table, still in her work clothes, reading through the documents on the drive with a terrifying intensity. We're not losing this farm, Cal, she said, her voice low and hard. How can you be sure? I asked, feeling the weight of the world crushing me. These people own the town. Sarah, they have lawyers, money, connections. She stood up, walked over to her purse, and pulled out something wrapped in a velvet cloth. She unwrapped it and set it on the table. It was a badge, not her usual detective shield, but a gold badge with 5 points and the city seal in the center, gleaming under the kitchen light. Chief, it read. I stared at it, then at her. Chief? Since when? Since 6 months ago, she said, a small, proud smile touching her lips. It's been an interim appointment, highly classified because I was brought in specifically to clean up the corruption in the municipal zoning and development sector. We've been building a RICO case against Apex Horizon for a year, Cal. You knew? I suspected, she corrected. I knew Pamela was dirty. I knew Apex was dirty. But I needed the link. I needed them to make a move on a property where I had total visibility. I needed them to come after us. We were bait. We were the sting, she said, taking my hand. I couldn't tell you because your reaction had to be real. Pamela had to believe she was winning. She had to believe you were desperate. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gotten careless with the 911 call. She wouldn't have put the extortion in writing. She looked at the clock. Friday at 3 p.m., that's when the federal warrants activate. Friday came, and the air in the HOA conference room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Pamela sat at the head of the mahogany table, looking like the cat that ate the canary and then sued the canary's family for indigestion. Her brother-in-law, Jonathan, sat next to her, tapping a gold pin on a stack of documents that represented the end of my life as a farmer. Arthur was there too, sitting in the corner, staring at his shoes, looking pale. Mr. Reed, Pamela said, sliding a contract across the table. I'm glad you decided to be reasonable. This offer is generous, considering the legal jeopardy you're in. Market value minus our legal fees and the damages for the assault, of course. I looked at the number. It was less than half of what the land was worth. And if I refuse? I asked, watching the clock on the wall tick toward 2:58. Then we destroy you, Jonathan said, bored, as if he was ordering lunch. We file the lawsuit. We get an injunction to stop your operations. We drain your accounts. And in 6 months, we buy the farm at auction for a fraction of this price anyway. It's a simple choice, Caleb, Pamela sneered. Sign the paper, take the scraps, and go play farmer somewhere else. The clock ticked. 2:59. I need a moment to think, I said. You don't have a moment, she snapped. Sign it now. Tick. 3 p.m. The heavy double doors of the conference room swung open with a bang that made Jonathan jump in his seat. Sarah walked in. She wasn't wearing her pantsuit. She was in full dress uniform, navy blue with gold braiding, the chief's badge catching the fluorescent light, her hat tucked under her arm. Behind her were 4 uniformed officers and 2 agents in FBI windbreakers. The silence in the room was absolute, a vacuum where Pamela's arrogance used to be. Sorry to interrupt, Sarah said, her voice filling the room, authoritative and calm. Traffic was a nightmare. Who are you? Pamela stammered, standing up, her face draining of color. I'm Chief Sarah Reed, she said, walking to the table and resting her hands on the leather surface. And I believe you know my husband. She looked at me and winked, a tiny, microscopic wink. This is a private meeting, Jonathan shouted, trying to regain control. You have no jurisdiction here. Actually, Sarah said, pulling a folded document from her jacket. When you engage in interstate racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion, you make it everyone's jurisdiction. She turned to the officers. Secure the room. What is this? Pamela shrieked as an officer moved toward her. I am the HOA president. I have connections. Your connections are currently being raided, Sarah said coolly. We just executed search warrants at the Apex Horizon offices and your brother-in-law's firm. And thanks to the recording of your 911 call, where we can hear you coaching your cousin before the operator picked up, we're adding filing a false police report and perjury to the list. Pamela looked at Arthur. You did this. Arthur stood up, and for the first time, he looked her in the eye. No, Pamela, you did this. I just stopped helping you hide it. Victoria Pamela Driscoll, Sarah said, as the officer clicked the handcuffs onto her wrists, a sound that was sweeter than any symphony I have ever heard. You are under arrest for extortion, fraud, and violation of the RICO Act. This is entrapment. Pamela screamed as they hauled her out, kicking and flailing, her dignity left somewhere back at the negotiation table. He set me up. His wife set me up. Sarah watched her go, then turned to me. She's right about one thing. She did set herself up. All we did was leave the door open. The aftermath was like watching a house of cards get hit by a leaf blower. It turned out Pamela and her crew had defrauded over 50 families in 3 counties. The forensic accountants found millions of dollars in kickbacks hidden in offshore accounts. Pamela got 8 years in federal prison. Her brother-in-law got 5 and was disbarred for life. Arthur pleaded guilty, testified against them, and got probation. He spends his weekends now doing pro bono work for legal aid, helping people fight predatory HOAs. As for us, the farm is doing better than ever. Once the news broke that we were the ones who took down the HOA mafia, people started coming from 2 towns over just to shake my hand and buy our eggs. We got our reputation back, and then some. But the best part was the quiet evening about a month later. I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip below the hills, listening to the chickens clucking softly in their coop. Sarah came out, no uniform, just jeans and a t-shirt, holding 2 beers. You know, I said, taking a sip. You could have told me you were chief. She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. I wanted to, Cal, but seeing the look on Pamela's face when I walked through that door, tell me it wasn't worth the wait. I thought about it. The shock, the fear, the total collapse of her empire in 10 seconds. Yeah, I laughed. It was worth it. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. We won because my wife happened to be the police chief. We won because we had an inside man. We won because we got lucky. But what about the families who don't have a badge in the family? What about the people who signed those papers because they were scared and alone? It makes you wonder how many Pamelas are out there right now, running their little kingdoms, thinking they're untouchable. So, do me a favor. If your HOA president starts acting like a dictator, or if a developer suddenly takes an interest in your neighborhood, dig a little deeper. You might not find a conspiracy, but then again, you might find a thread that unravels the whole sweater. And if you do, don't let go. Thanks for listening, folks, and remember, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men and farmers to do nothing. Catch you on the next one.